Have you heard about Joseph, the son of Jacob, in the Bible? What about Joseph? I'm very much sure you have heard about this Joseph in the Bible. The famous Joseph who has a very inspiring story, a story that relates to our personal encounters of life on a daily to day basis. So now, what about Joseph? He is one of the great patriarchs in the Bible. His story covers the last part of the book of Genesis. He had a number of dreams. He was the most loved in his family. He was hated by his brothers. He was sold to the Ishmaelites. He was once a slave. So there are a number of things that Joseph is known of. A lot of things can be used to describe him, and all these things happened to him at a particular time, and they happened for a purpose that we are going to discover very soon. Now let us dig deeper into the story of Joseph and come up with that clear picture of the story of Joseph. What about Joseph? So the story of Joseph is narrated in the book of Genesis chapter 37 to 50. Chapters 37 to 50. That's where we find the genesis of the story of Joseph, the beginning of the story of Joseph. And we shall discover more as we break down this story and really have a clear picture of what used to happen to Joseph at different times as narrated in this scripture. So Joseph was the son of Jacob. Jacob, who is also called Israel. Joseph had 11 brothers. Out of the 11 brothers, Joseph was the only one who was born to Rachel and his young brother Benjamin. Now it is narrated to say Joseph was one of the children who was most loved by his father Jacob. And we see that this is one thing that even predisposed him to being hated by his brothers so much. When Joseph was born and grew up, his father made him a very nice robe. And this robe wasn't even made for any of his elder brothers. But in expressing that love Jacob had for Joseph, he made this robe for him. At the age of 17, Joseph began to have dreams. And in these dreams, Joseph was always depicted as supreme over his brothers and over his parents. And this angered so much his brothers and his parents. Him being the youngest, it pained them so much, and their hearts were filled with so much jealousy, seeing their youngest brother being supreme over them. In his first dream, that's where Joseph saw himself and his brothers in a field where the bundles of the corn that was being found by then bowed down to the bundle of Joseph. And in his second dream, Joseph dreamt of the sun, moon, and stars, and again bowing down to him. And in this dream, it even pictured the mother being the sun and the moon. And it's one thing that angered the parents so much. But in one way or another, Jacob still believed to say those dreams were still going to amount up to something. So we see that Joseph, the whole lot of his life, it wasn't an easy path, because the dearest he loved so much, the people who were closest to him, were people who stood against him so much. And to cut the long story short, we find that Joseph reached at a point when his brothers reached at a point when they thought of selling him. That was after his father Jacob sent him to go and look after the brothers, to take food for the brothers at wherever place they were. So now, the brothers of Joseph, they came up with a plan now to sell him. And we see that it's at this point that Joseph's journey gets even critical, and he begins to draw closer and closer to his purpose. And as he is sold to the Ishmaelites, we see that Joseph lands in Egypt, in one of the biggest leaders in Egypt. And it's from there that he's found in prison, where he's made to be in charge over everything that side. And it's narrated and told to say everything Joseph did was successful. It was blessed. Everything Joseph touched was blessed. And by that, we see that Joseph was continuously being elevated from time to time. And in him being elevated, he was at times being brought down again, which I'm sure in his human thoughts made him to wonder as to whether God was still on his side. So we find that in the end, the dreams that Joseph used to have became fulfilled. The dreams that were caused so much hate amongst his brothers and parents were fulfilled. And we see that at some point, the brothers of Joseph went and had an encounter with him in Egypt after there being a famine, a very long famine. And Joseph was now one of the most supreme leaders in Egypt by then. And we see that the dreams were fulfilled. His elder brothers bowed to him knowingly and unknowingly. And we see everything, pieces being pushed together by that gesture that is shown in fulfillment of those dreams. So now, having narrated that story, what are we picking from the lesson, from the story of Joseph? What lessons are we picking from this story of Joseph? The first lesson we are finding in the story of Joseph is that God fulfills his promises. God fulfills his promises. It's like through the dreams Joseph was having, it was a promise that was being given to Joseph to say, one day I'm going to make you a great leader, and one day I'm going to elevate you. And by that we see that God fulfilled that promise by making Joseph supreme and a very great leader at that particular time. God can turn evil into good. The action of Joseph being sold, the action of Joseph being hated by his brothers, we see that that was turned into good. Though it seemed as evil at the first time and everything wasn't adding up according to how Joseph may have perceived things, but we see that those things worked out to the good of his advantage. Even our loved ones can betray us. Even our loved ones can betray us. It's not a guarantee that people who we love so much can never betray us. We should expect anything from those who love us, and this is something that should help us to learn a lesson and teach us to always expect anything even from those who love us. But remember, we should be able to learn something from this. We should be able to come back together just like the brothers of Joseph did. Our faithfulness is our strength. Our faithfulness is our strength. Throughout the path of Joseph, he stood to be faithful in every action he did. In whatever action he took, Joseph was faithful. At the prison, he was faithful. In the house of Potiphar, he was faithful. In the time of Pharaoh, when he was even made a very much higher leader, he was still faithful. And that was his strength throughout his path of life. Forgiveness brings us together. Forgiveness brings us together. And indeed, we see that it was not until Joseph had to forgive his brothers that they had that opportunity to get back together. Despite the evil that happened in the past, despite all the lies, despite all the bad things that happened in the past with his brothers, we see that they still had to get back together, and this was only to be accomplished by them forgiving each other, by Joseph forgiving his brothers. And by that we see that this brought them together. And even as we live in our day-to-day lives, we should realize that it's only when we forgive those who have trespassed against us, it's only when those who wrong us are forgiven by us, that's the only way and opportunity that they will be brought together again, and peace will reign. This was the lesson of Joseph. I hope we shall continue next time with another lesson from the Bible. Otherwise, thank you so much with reference from the New International Bible. Join us next time on the Hope Drive. ZM. God bless you. Hey viewers, I was your host today on the Hope Drive ZM. My name is Christopher Wendabai Oyatwa. I hope the story of Joseph has inspired you just as it has inspired me so much. Join us next time even as we continue inspiring each other through different ways, through songs, through poems, and through sermons. Thank you so much and join us next time.